6:42 a.m. The grocery store lights are already humming. A man stands in the checkout line with one hand on the cart, thumb resting on his phone, watching a balance that hasn't changed. There is milk in the cart, bread, a small pack of batteries he almost did not buy. But when he taps to pay, nothing moves. It looks like a payment problem. It isn't. The screen doesn't say insufficient funds. It says something softer, temporary restriction, a red icon, a quiet denial. He checks again, like it might fix itself. It doesn't. There was a time when money didn't behave like this. You could feel it, fold it, count it twice on a kitchen table. If you had it, you could use it. No signal required, no update pending, no approval waiting somewhere upstream. Now it lives behind glass. The belief is simple. Digital money is just convenience. Faster payments, cleaner transactions, no friction. Tap, confirm, move on. The commercials show it working every time: coffee, gas, groceries, no hesitation, no questions. And most days, it does. That's what makes the moment so quiet when it doesn't. The receipt printer hums for the next customer. A woman behind him shifts her weight, eyes drifting to her own phone. Nobody says anything, but everyone understands something just broke, and not in a way you can see. The system didn't say you're broke. It said you're not allowed. The card is still in his hand. That is how modern financial control usually arrives, not with a locked vault. With a polite error message. Most people don't notice the system when it's working. They only notice the pause, right at the moment they need it most. The question is no longer whether the money exists. It is who gets to let it move. What's changing is not the speed of money. It's the behavior of it. A dollar used to be a unit, neutral. Once it was in your hand, it didn't care where you spent it, how fast you spent it, or why. It moved because you decided to move it. That was the entire system. Now the unit itself can carry instructions, not around it, inside it. A balance on a screen is no longer just stored value. It is a set of permissions conditions that can be updated without the holder ever touching it. Expiration dates, geographic limits, category restrictions, all attached directly to the account and sometimes to the individual transaction. The object hasn't changed. It still looks like a number on a phone. But the behavior has. A driver pulls into a diesel station at 5001 A to mine, card in hand, truck idling beside him. He's hauling produce 400 miles, tight margin, delivery window locked. The produce behind him is already on a clock. He can smell the diesel before the pump lets him buy it. The invoice for fuel last week was already higher than expected. He runs the math in his head while the pump clicks ready. He taps, and the pump doesn't unlock, not because the account is empty, not because the station is closed, but because the transaction doesn't meet a condition he can't see, a temporary usage limit, a category flag, something upstream. The pump is not broken. It is obeying. The belief is that money is still money, just digitized. That if the number is there, the transaction will follow. That access is automatic. The reality is quieter. Money and access have been separated. This is the hidden mechanism. Not just surveillance, not just speed, control at the point of use. The power to decide in real time whether money is allowed to finish the job money was created to do. And it doesn't arrive all at once. It builds in layers. First, cash becomes less practical. Stores stop accepting it. Banks make larger withdrawals slower, more questioned, more conditional. ATMs run dry more often. People adapt because digital is easier. Then digital becomes dominant. Payments, wages, benefits, everything routes through centralized rails. Efficiency improves. Fraud drops. The system looks stronger. Then a disruption appears. A crisis. It doesn't have to be financial. It rarely starts that way. It can be environmental, political, health-related. The reason almost doesn't matter. What matters is the response. Restrictions don't come as bans. They come as adjustments. A spending limit here, a category restriction there, a temporary measure applied at the wallet level. Not to everyone. Not at first, just enough to make the new boundary feel normal. Picture a citizen trying to fill a tank under a new rationing protocol. The fuel is there. The payment method works everywhere else, but the wallet has reached a monthly category limit and the pump never starts. The old system didn't fail because paper money stopped working. It was replaced by one that could be modified without your consent. That is the part hidden inside the word convenience. The cruel part is that the failure does not announce itself. It hides inside normal transactions receipts, invoices, payment screens until something essential stops moving. A store manager refreshes a delivery dashboard. The truck is late, not delayed, blocked. Payment authorization didn't clear somewhere upstream. By morning, the milk case has gaps. By noon, the produce shelf looks picked over. And by the time it becomes visible, the mechanism is already in place. This is not just a future scenario. It is a pattern. And the record begins with people who trusted the number until the number stopped behaving like access. In early 2022, Canada showed how fast financial access could become conditional during a declared emergency. Emergency measures allowed financial service providers to freeze or suspend accounts connected to the blockades without first obtaining a court order. That is the forensic point. Not every account, not every citizen, but enough to show that the banking layer could function as an enforcement layer almost overnight. Truck drivers parked along frozen highways, engines idling in the cold, checked their phones and found something unfamiliar. Accounts interrupted during an emergency process they did not control. No branch visit that could solve it. No normal delay. Just a screen, a balance, and then silence. A man sat in his cab with the thermos going cold, scrolling through an app that no longer answered the way it had the day before. The belief was that banks were neutral custodians, that access required ordinary due process, that if you followed the rules, your money remained yours. The reality arrived faster than the explanation. Access was conditional. 2 decades earlier, in Argentina, the failure looked different, but the outcome felt the same. The Corralito placed restrictions on withdrawals from bank accounts. People lined up outside banks, hands wrapped around withdrawal slips, waiting to reach money they had already earned. Doors stayed closed longer each morning. Limits were imposed, then tightened. It said you could only have a little of it back. A father stood in line, folding and unfolding the same withdrawal slip, as if the paper itself might change the answer. The bank line became a household chore. That is the detail history tends to compress. The important shift wasn't the shortage. It was where control had moved. Lebanon gave the same fracture a name. People began calling trapped bank dollars lawlers, dollars that appeared in bank accounts but could not leave the bank as ordinary dollar cash. A number, separated from its function. Families sat at kitchen tables, recalculating everything: tuition, food, rent around balances that no longer translated cleanly into daily life. The belief was that a dollar is a dollar. The reality was that context decides what a dollar can do. Here is what the official record often misses. The system doesn't need to erase money to break it. It only needs to interrupt its use. And when that happens, the difference between households becomes visible. Some families had small reserves outside the system, cash tucked away, goods stored nearby, relationships that allowed quiet exchange. Others had everything inside the formal structure accounts, cards, digital balances, and nowhere else to turn when access slowed or stopped. History usually records the policy. Families remember the moment the card stopped working at the counter. The old systems didn't fail in a single moment. They shifted just enough, just fast enough, that ordinary people realized too late that ownership and access were no longer the same thing. And once access breaks, the next pattern is even colder. It never breaks evenly. The first people to feel this shift are not reckless. They are not uninformed. They are simply closest to the system. Fully inside it, a small merchant opens their shop at 8:03 a.m., flips the sign, checks the register, and glances at their account balance before the first customer walks in. The card reader still works. The sign still says open. The first customer does not know the business is already losing the day. It looks fine. Enough to restock. Enough to cover the week. But when a routine transfer triggers a review, something automated, something minor, the account locks. No warning that matters. No person to call who can fix it in real time. By noon, suppliers are asking for payment. By evening, shelves are half empty. Rent is still due. The business didn't fail. The access point did. That is who pays first. People whose entire economic life runs through a single channel. The belief is that stability comes from being inside the system. That formal access accounts, cards, digital records makes you safer, more protected, more legitimate. The reality is more specific. Dependence increases exposure. A person who earns, stores, and spends entirely through centralized rails has no alternative path when those rails slow down. Having money is not the same as being able to use it, and that difference doesn't show up until it matters. There was a time when households held part of their system in their own hands. Cash in a drawer, food stored within reach, skills that turned raw goods into something usable. Payment and provision were closer together. Now those functions are separated, specialized, outsourced across distance and infrastructure, not because the old way failed, but because the new way scaled faster, cleaner, more efficient. until it doesn't. This is where the line shifts from economic to personal. A parent stands in a grocery aisle, looking at a full cart, then back at a phone that isn't approving the total. Nothing about the moment is dramatic. No alarms, just a quiet recalculation. What gets put back? What gets delayed? What gets explained later at home? This is where a system reveals its priorities, because while access tightens for some, it remains open for others. Institutions that sit inside the system's core state entities, large financial intermediaries, don't experience the same friction. They operate at the level where rules are set, not where they are encountered. Their screens do not say pending. Their wires clear before the small merchant even reaches a help desk. That is what proximity buys. Compliance becomes a form of insulation. Not absolute protection, but proximity to the decision layer. It is not about good actors and bad actors. It is about position. That is the uncomfortable part. The system does not have to hate you to place you last. Connected versus dependent. Local access versus remote approval. Physical possession versus digital permission. The system does not need to target everyone to reshape behavior. It only needs to interrupt enough people in visible ways that the boundary becomes understood. And once that boundary is accepted, the next danger is more uncomfortable. The things that look safest because they are already inside the system. What looks safest in normal times is often what fails most cleanly under pressure. A bank balance, a stablecoin, a retirement account displayed as a precise number, updated in real time, clean, legible, reassuring. The interface suggests control. The belief is that visibility equals security, that if you can see it, you can use it. But the structure underneath tells a different story. These are centralized claims dependent on uninterrupted systems, layered permissions, and institutional continuity. The app still opens, the number still loads. The problem is what the number can no longer do. When the input breaks, they don't degrade slowly, they pause. A vault used to hold objects, now it holds records, and records require cooperation to become usable. That is the fragility. History shows a different pattern, not in what looked impressive, but in what kept working without permission. Small things. Quiet systems. A family with a pantry shelf that held more than decoration, 30 jars of preserved food, counted and rotated, not enough to last forever, enough to absorb a disruption. A neighbor who traded eggs for flour without needing a network connection. A bit of cash set aside, not as an investment, but as a bridge between systems. These were not alternatives to the economy. They were buffers against its interruptions. And they came with trade-offs. Cash loses value over time and can be lost or stolen. Stored food requires space, rotation, attention. Local networks depend on trust, proximity, and reciprocity, things that take years to build and can fracture under stress. None of it scales cleanly. None of it is efficient. That inefficiency is the point. The old systems didn't stop working. They were set aside because they were slower, less convenient, harder to standardize. They demanded participation instead of passive access. Now that difference matters. A family moves through a week after a sudden account freeze. The card declines on a Monday. By Tuesday, they are opening a drawer they haven't touched in months. A small envelope. The bills are folded around an old grocery receipt. Enough to buy time, not comfort. By Wednesday, they are calling someone they know, not a hotline. Asking for help in a way that feels unfamiliar. They are not out of money. They are out of access. The ones who navigate this best are not the ones with the highest balances. They are the ones with multiple pathways, some inside the system, some outside it. Not as a statement, as a habit. There is a quiet dignity in systems that do not need to be impressive to keep working. But there is no illusion here. These systems are partial, fragile in their own ways. A garden can fail. A local network can dry up. Cash can run out. Time and labor are real constraints. Not everyone has space, land, or the ability to maintain parallel systems. This is not a replacement. It is a margin, and the pattern holds. When formal systems tighten, survival comes from what does not need to ask first. That is why the final question is not what you own. It is what still functions when permission disappears. The system didn't collapse. It changed what money is allowed to do. Your bank account can still show a number. Your app can still open. Your balance can still look intact. But if that number requires permission to move, then it is no longer a tool you control. It is a tool you request access to. That is the shift. There was a time when households understood this without naming it. Cash in a drawer. Food within reach. A way to get through a week without asking anyone. Not because the past was better, but because access was closer, more physical, harder to interrupt. That knowledge didn't become obsolete. It became unnecessary until it wasn't. A kitchen table, a few bills folded under an old receipt, a shelf that gives a family one more day. These are simple things, but they answer a different question than a balance on a screen. Resilience is not nostalgia. It is access that does not wait for approval. The fragile household is not just the one with less money. It is the one with no alternative when money stops working. I've read enough of these moments to know how they end for most people. Not with panic. With confusion. A delay. A quiet realization that the system they trusted is still there but no longer responding. Money that requires permission is not money. It is a leash. And in the end, the choice is simple. Rely entirely on what can be paused, or keep something that works without permission.